everyone. This is X-Raised, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. I'm Miles, your host, and I'll be rejoined by a leader who doesn't just talk about standards, sustainability, and resilience. He actually lives it, builds it, and helps others make it stick. Because this one feels timely. Nothing gets a business leader's attention quite like the words continuity planning, legal risk, and compliance, especially when they suddenly become very real. Our guest today has spent over 4 decades helping organizations not just respond when things go wrong, but build systems, capability, and confidence so they're ready long before that moment arrives. He's worked across industries, across borders, and across standards at a time when corporate responsibility and sustainability were still nice ideas, not global expectations. He's the managing director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, internationally recognized ISO certified, and a founding member of the GRI or Global Reporting Initiatives. Here's Ian Erskine. Hi, Ian. Welcome back to the show.
And welcome again, uh, young Miss Traveller. I'll call you, travelling across the world. And as you jokingly said, we can both say good morning to each other rather than
Good
being a day
evening.
behind.
Yes.
How exciting. And yes, and today's topic is going to be very, very interesting because we're actually going to take, I guess, the mystery, I guess in some respects, the fear in reference to when we talk about legal, legislative, and compliance awareness matters. And we're going to put that into a framework where it's quite simple to understand, quite simple rules, what's right and what's wrong.
Mhm.
And now, above all, because of the way things have moved, I guess, over the last 2 years, particularly even faster over the last 6 months, particularly now we start to have to understand the global reach of the
Mhm.
importance of legal legislative requirements. But what we'll do today is bring that back very much to basic understanding and make it
Mhm.
very simple to understand for everyone.
Yes. So in this episode, as you touched on a bit earlier, we're going into something that sits right at the heart of business resilience today. When businesses hear terms like continuity planning, legal risk, or regulatory compliance, Ian, many still see them as reactive or even optional until something goes wrong. So from your perspective, why have these elements now become core to business resilience and long-term sustainability rather than a compliance checkbox?
Well, I think, as I said just before, it's because now we are so, what's the word for it, exposed globally to everything we do.
Yes.
Okay. Even now, with you and I talking, we're talking around the world. So what we're saying, that's going around the world. So
Mhm.
obviously, there's not just etiquette and manners and so forth, the way we talk to each other. I guess the point I'm making here, if we all understand, we're now on a global stage. Now, being on a global stage puts us into a position of saying, okay, let's just stop and better understand how we transfer information. So we do that by talking to each other, by smiling, our facial recognitions and reactions and so forth. And the way that is dealt with now in reference to data is very intriguing. Now, the European Union have come up with a very interesting term. It's called personal identifiable information.
Mhm.
And they go to great lengths to explain that if this is handled correctly, it's basically the people, first of all, have to understand what that information is and how that is the importance that is to each and every one of us,
Uh-huh.
right? But above all, I think what they're saying is rather than legislate needless legislation and so forth, I think if we get people to understand the importance of what we're talking about, our own personal information, that way we ourselves will use manners, etiquette, as I said, good behaviour practices, and we won't need to be lectured or told or have laws put in place that ultimately erode our freedoms. And this is where ACI Global is going to come to in reference to this. We're going to
Mhm.
make it ultimately people better understand ultimately it's their responsibility. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And if we bring it back to our own responsibility, and then things will work correctly between one and each of others, right? And even in group meetings and things like that, we have to now bring this very much back to adequate manners, an ability to understand people, our own personal space. People must understand not to encroach in other people's personal spaces and things like that. If we have this nailed and we understand it and we do it ourselves, ultimately we're not going to need a third party, or worst of all, governments to be telling us what to do as we move forward in reference to I guess the topic is probably too broad, but when we talk about social media,
Yeah.
to me, it goes much further than that, because it actually goes even to the point where, even when Gianmarco and I were talking last night and morning Heath time over in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
there's an understanding of a time difference between the two of us, right? There's understanding that UK and Australia, there's different social understandings and fabrics that we all have to better understand. So really, I think, or I actually know, that one of the areas where ACI Global will start to look at in reference to personal learning will be there will be a little bit more effort put into understanding different cultures, different backgrounds,
Yeah.
and things like that, because it's so important these days with such a global reach and the transfer of data so easily, that this has to be the next facet where we go, because if we don't do that, we will ultimately invite robots to take over what we're doing
Mm-hmm.
because of that lack of our own personal control.
Yeah. Right.
I hope that makes sense.
It does. And that really resonates, Ian. I mean, continuity is about preparedness rather than fear, especially the issues that we need to address about, as you said, social media and data handling. And I see how confidence in systems actually frees leaders to focus on opportunity, not just risk. And that naturally brings us to people, because systems are only as strong as the humans behind them. And one thing
Yes.
ACI Global consistently emphasizes is the continuity and compliance. They don't sit in documents, they live in people. So, how does developing competence, skills, and capability within an organization reduce legal and compliance risk in real practical terms?
Well, you've heard me say this many times, but again, I take people back to the very start. I employ them to read the little book, Who Moved My Cheese, to
Uh
give
huh.
them an understanding, first of all, risk, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in actual fact, it is risk. And the risk is, if you do breach someone's personal space, if you do breach someone's data protection, personal information protection,
Mm-hmm.
all this comes back to ourselves as an entity in one another. If we understand ultimately we are responsible,
Uh huh.
we can't be beholden to say, no, no, we'll leave that up to our organisation to look after, or we'll hand that over to the industry association of which that business is running. For argument's sake, it could be a cafe running within the entertainment industry, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
our industry, education and training, rather than hand that control over to a regulator, or worse still, the government.
Uh huh.
It's beholden on ourselves to put our processes in place. And when you stop and think about it, again, it goes back to common decency, common etiquette between ourselves when we're sitting down, for argument's sake, having a discussion between ourselves. And you may know from the very start of that discussion, the person you're going to be talking to has a different way of dealing with certain issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you start off with the understanding, oh, I'm not going to listen to a word they're wrong, I'm right. If we have that attitude, you may as well not even have that discussion. But where I come from is if you have that attitude, you're never going to learn. Okay.
Right.
It's
Uh-huh.
interesting. I often talk to people that have completely different political persuasions to myself. But it's quite amazing when you talk through the issues, and quite often this comes from working together with them in a business,
Uh-huh.
right? And quite often it comes back to the responsibility of when you leave home to drive to work, finish your work, and then drive home. I've actually sometimes sat down with people towards the end of the day, and they're clearly tired, they're stressed out, and I'm literally saying to them, and we agree, really, I shouldn't be getting in my car and driving home because I'm absolutely, totally exhausted,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm frustrated because I haven't been able to achieve my tasks at work, right? Now, this is the point where I talk to organisations and say, okay, it's all very well having your key personal performance indicators in place, your tasks all in place, but those tasks have to be completable. You
Uh-huh.
can't have a situation where have far too much on their plate. So not only is it that they don't finish at home, they tend to take that work and work from home. So
Mm-hmm.
that affects their personal life as well. So
Right.
again, I'm trying to bring this back to people and try to demonstrate, and we'll be doing this within our certification programs for organisations, our certification programs for people, is we now have to go back and clearly look at deliverable tasks that can be verified and validated.
Mm-hmm.
And the hallmark of that is, as I said, come 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whenever a time the person leaves to go home, they have to be able to, sometimes they have to be capable to hop in a
Mm-hmm.
motor car and drive home through intense traffic for an hour.
Yeah.
Now, that takes a lot of concentration,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where I think quite often organisations mistakenly believe, oh, that's not my responsibility. Well, in actual fact, it is, because if your employee leaves work totally exhausted, your primary duty of care kicks in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it clearly says, well, hang on, you can clearly see that Joe or Jill is completely stressed. They should not get in a motor car and drive home.
Right.
And this is where I'm saying, and this is where if we bring it back to people, rather than involve the lawmakers, the industry experts, and people like that. Because at the end of the day, they don't know your employees as well as you know them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They will overreach, and that will cause more concern. Um, what's the word for it? Pushback.
Yeah.
Because I know myself, if I hear that someone's going to take my civil liberties away, right? I tend to push back and I say, no, hold on. I don't want you doing that. Oh, for the sake of good of the world, we've got to have a social media ban on people under the age of 16, for
Uh-huh.
argument's sake. Now, I'm saying to everyone, well, hold on, let's step back. Who ultimately is the primary educators of people or children, even up to the age of 16? It's the parents.
Right. Uh-huh.
It's not lawmakers. Now,
Right.
I think all this, what's happening today, the angst within social media and privacy would not happen if we had been allowed to be able to control our own destiny as families. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying. I now employing people, organisations, even lawmakers to step back, allow that to be done people to people.
Uh-huh. Makes so much sense. And I love that framing, Ian, because it makes compliance feel less intimidating and more empowering. When people understand their role, the whole organization moves with more clarity and confidence. And it's
Yes.
a critical topic to discuss. I mean, especially in Australia right now, the social media regulations. It's very complex. I think we need to have a topic about that. And for
Yes.
for many businesses, Ian, understanding legal and legislative obligations is one thing, but applying them consistently is where the challenge really sits. ACI Global aligns closely with international standards and legislative requirements, yet you're known for making them practical and usable. How do you help organizations move from simply knowing their obligations to actually embedding them into everyday operations and decision making?
Actually, this is a very quite a simple process, and we employ not only people but all organisations just simply to be in touch with their industry groups, be in touch with their political leaders, and get from them what is required. Ultimately, they have to provide that information to you by law. Right? Now, there's ways and means of doing that. You can become a membership of certain safety bodies, environmental bodies, people groups, and that's what you should be doing, is having group memberships so that you are informed of when changes are coming and things like that. And that's the thing that I employ everyone to be aware of what's happening, for argument's sake, within social media. But also, and I can only speak from Australia's point of view, there's a new fatigue law out in reference to how we deal with fatigue in the workplace. Now, this was a very interesting one and very dear to my heart because I'm on the membership list, so I get notification when the first drafts and things had started to talk about it. And when the first draft came out in reference to the fatigue law, I thought, well, this is going to be very interesting. So I did a research, looked at primary duty of care, and it was mentioned 4 times. I said, okay, that's a plus. But then I found when I looked into it, each of the 4 occasions, the primary duty of care, it was the sole responsibility of the business owner or the senior manager to make sure that people were not fatigued working in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So I quickly penned my response to that saying, well, so you're expecting the owner or the senior manager to walk around with the employee that's yawning his head off and keeping an eye on that he doesn't trip or fall, or politely ask him, go home because you're too tired, right? So I suggested it be rewritten and primary duty of care kicks in from the very start before you leave home to go to work. So it's the employee's responsibility as well, right? And again, this is what I'm saying. Again, it's very simple to get all this information, get sent to you. You need to have, as an organisation, a set process. So you discuss that together, right? And you put measures in place to make sure, for argument fatigue, it is so simple. Each and every one of us, we look after each other. And if you see someone that's yawning their head off, you just make a comment. Well, geez, you look tired.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's a bit like yourself. You just hopped off a plane after 34, nearly 40 hours. You have to be very careful today of monitoring your fatigue levels and things like that.
Yes.
And I know you
Noted.
are. Yes. And that's basically what we as a learning provider
Mm-hmm.
will be emphasising on people. It's your responsibility to understand your climate compliance needs. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the responsibility of the industry organisation or even the organisation or even governments to be able to tell you, no, follow the law because you can't drive a car.
Yeah.
You should be able to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. It's very
Compliance
basic.
made easy, simple, practical, and feasible.
Right. And that's an important distinction, Ian. From my standpoint, embedding compliance into daily habits almost feels like brand protection. I mean, I'm safeguarding my reputation, my trust, and the trust of my colleagues and clients, and of course, long-term value. And when that embedding really works, Ian, the results tend to show up across the business, and in this case, across every transaction that we make. And you work with organizations across industries, all with very different risk profiles. When continuity, planning, and compliance are done well, what tangible benefits do clients usually experience? Whether that's operational confidence, stakeholder trust, audit concerns, or even financial performance.
Well, you can take it from 2 sides, okay? Just imagine with a stakeholder, the truck driver turns up with a cooler van that hadn't been switched on. Oh, he had a very bad night and he'd forgotten to switch it on. He turns up and expects to have his load popped in the freezer van. And he wonders why. Someone will say, no, 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 we've just taken a cool check and it's 45 degrees. So there's no point us putting frozen fish in that van, right? So again, people to
Uh-huh.
people. Say the question, ask the question. No, switch your van on, leave it sit for an hour or 2 hours, and then we'll load you. Not a problem. Human nature, you've made a mistake. That's fine. But again, it comes back to the people themselves to be able to manage that compliance. But above all, I want to be in and run a training services to provide learning to people so that it becomes second nature. So they want to be able to do these things. So when they get up and go to work, they want to at all times be enthused even before they get in the motor car or they walk to the train station. They want to have that notion, wow, I want to get to work and finish my task and do the very best I can, right? And because ultimately, as we said many times, that's putting the control back in people's bodies, okay, giving us the power to drive our own success. And that's what we call accelerating continuous improvement. We have to have that ability to bounce out of bed, okay? Have the routine, okay? Before we leave the bedroom, we make the bed, okay? Before we leave the home, we make sure all the dishes are washed up, the kitchen's tidy and everything. Don't just leave that to mum or our wives, okay? Make sure that's all ready because we're all part of the process of living together and wanting to be high achievers. And again, going back to, and this is where your compliance assessment really counts because your compliance assessment will start to assess these high level indicators, right? Fatigue levels in the workplace, health and well-being levels in the workplace. And, you've heard me mention it before, if a family's just got a new child, okay? Everyone within the workforce have to understand that either mum or dad are going to be coming to work. They've had extra issues, fatigues, right? And, let's manage our workplaces to the point where we can say, well, mum and dad, you don't need to come to work for a couple of weeks. We'll look after you accordingly, look after your bub, right? And to me, if that's part of your compliance, you get to your compliance to say, well, that's not compliance. We will do that as a normal function of our business. That's
Part
health
of
and
it.
well-being.
Yes, and it's just interesting how often we hear that compliance, when done right, actually unlocks growth rather than holding it back. And that
Yes.
mindset shift alone can be a game changer for leadership teams, right? Which brings us to the future, Ian, because expectations aren't slowing down. And as regulatory demands, environmental considerations, a lot, and stakeholder scrutiny continue to evolve, where do you see the biggest continuity and compliance risk emerging for businesses? I mean, how is ACI Global positioning itself to help organizations stay ahead rather than constantly playing catch up?
I think there needs now to be an extra effort on the global sphere, so to speak,
Okay.
and understanding global pressures, not
Mm-hmm.
just for people, but for businesses, organisations, and even governments, people that we elect into government. We need them to be understanding that they're not just dealing with laws and regulations and just, for argument's sake, Australians. They have to deal and have an understanding as what is happening overseas and around. As I said, globalisation is upon us, right? And we now have to better understand the legal ramifications, compliance ramifications, and going back to one of the key ones at the moment is personal, identifiable information, all our information coming from human intelligence and the ability to stand up and say, hold on, I'm not going to allow my brain cells or my human intelligence to be migrated or hacked and taken somewhere else. That's mine. Okay. And I think if we concentrate on that, I think we'll end up going in a far better direction than I think that some of our governments are trying to take us today.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's a holistic approach,
Yes.
right? The global pressure and government regulations. Forward-looking approach really sets ACI Global apart. I would say it's not just about meeting today's standards, but also building organizations that stay relevant tomorrow. And I think continuity planning and compliance are about Confidence, Ian. I think that's what this is all about. Confidence for leaders, for teams, and even for customers. I mean, I've seen that in my own work how businesses that invest early in capability and systems don't just survive disruption, they grow through it. So, Ian, thank you for being clear and thank you for once again sharing your depth of knowledge, practical insight, and clear thinking with us. It's a pleasure as always.
And always, yes, and thank you very much, everyone. And young lady, you go and get some rest, and
Thank
we'll
you.
no doubt catch up in the next couple of days because I've got a couple of exciting things I want to share with you as well. And
Yes, please.
yes, so thank you once again, and listeners, thanks again for being part of our journey, and we
Mm-hmm.
will welcome you back next week.
What a wonderful conversation, Ian. Thank you so much. For those watching or listening today, if you're looking to strengthen your organization's continuity planning, legal and legislative compliance, or people capability, or everything, ACI Global and e-Quip offer internationally recognized training, certification, and mentoring programs across ISO standards, auditing, risk, and sustainability. So head over to aciglobal.com.au now. And of course, thank you for being part of this growing community that believes businesses can be both smart and responsible. Until next time, this has been your host Miles with Ian, as always, reminding you to stay focused, driven, and inspired with X-Raced.